Bruce felt he was fairly flying over the rooftops, under a moon sliding behind racing clouds. He was actually only leaping from one rooftop to the next, sometimes using his newest projection grapple to swing over whole streets. He stopped for a moment on a roof across from an apartment building, where through a window he could see a father reading to his small daughter as she lay in bed, Mom smilingly watching from the doorway. Perhaps they lived modest lives in that creaking apartment building, but right then it felt to him that their lives were somehow much bigger than Bruce Wayne's. Something in him ached to carve out a home for a wife, a child, to create a whole different quality of life. He couldn't surrender his mission, but maybe there was a chance he didn't have to be alone. Of all people, Taya would understand. Then the dad got up and turned off the light, and went out of that little room with his wife, shutting the door on Bruce Wayne. Wait, he was Bruce? Bruce dressed as Batman? That was a mistake, and mistakes weren't allowed. He couldn't be Bruce and do what Batman had to do. He moved hurriedly on, his movements now not as sure. He crossed another rooftop and shot the grapple across to an old stone building. It latched onto a gargoyle and held firmly. He swung across the street, hit the coil switch, and it pulled him up to the gargoyle, an almost bat-like figure with its scalloped stone wings and animal face eyeing him. The lower part of that face eroded by the acid rains, missing, just like the lower half of the face he'd seen in the Batcave, like that mocking shadow. He winced, climbed atop the gargoyle, pulled himself from there to the rooftop, and ran across the roof, an image of Taya sharp in his mind. He came to a dead stop on the corner of the taller building overlooking Drago's storage and supply across the street. Peering over the edge, he saw some men 8 stories below, moving furtively into the building through a side door, and one of them was carrying a crate. Time to get serious. He had left Taya at her hotel. She didn't invite him in, though he could tell she was tempted. And it was good she didn't, because he would have had to say no. Reluctantly, but he'd have said no. Yet when he'd summoned the Batmobile to a warehouse parking lot near the hotel, took the costume from its trunk and changed, he'd been whistling while he was doing it. Whistling a tune from De Hartmann he'd heard Taya play on the piano once. You don't prepare to be Batman by whistling a damn tune, he reminded himself. Bruce had to go away now, and Batman had to be here. And only Batman. He closed his eyes, balled his fists, and remembered that night, in the alley outside the theater. No! Now, on that Gotham rooftop, Bruce Wayne had left the costume. Batman was back. His eyes narrowed, his pulse quickened. The Batman feeling swept over him, all-consuming. A fury tempered by calculation, a heat in his spine, a focused intensity chilling his nerves, a one-pointed attention, a two-pointed cowl. Batman assessed the street, saw the quickest way across and down to the Drago building. He fixed his secondary grapple onto a solid cornice, ran to the rear of the building he was on, and long jumped off. It had been 1 year and 3 months since he'd gotten used to simply leaping off buildings many stories high, diving into space without a net, and his momentum carried him out to the end of the grapple line. He turned at the end of the swing, pulling his kinetic force back through the motion so that it redoubled, carrying him whooshing past the front corner of the building, up and over the power and phone lines, over the intervening street, and down to the roof of the Drago building below. He hit it at just the right angle, some of his falling energy soaked up by the cable as he manipulated the gripper, so that he broke neither his ankles nor the roof. He gave the gripper the exact twist and tug that would send a signal to the grapple, which unhooked itself and coiled back to the grapple launcher in his hand. Batman saw that it was an old-fashioned building, with a trapdoor roof hatch for maintenance. The newer ones, more burglar-proof, didn't have them. It struck Batman as a bit too convenient, their having a rendezvous in a building with that trapdoor, which might have been built just for him. He turned his back on it, went to the corner of the building, and looked over the edge. There was a guard with an ordinary 12-gauge shotgun in his hand down there, a white man in civilian clothes and a black watch cap. The man glanced toward the rooftop, sensing something, and Batman drew back a little. But the sentry didn't see him. The gunman went back to strolling back and forth in the alley, and Batman, using infrared binoculars, immediately recognized his face. It was bisected with a scar he'd given the guy himself about a year before, when he'd thrown him through a plate glass window.
Tommy Dench.
Dench was a speed dealer and a rapist, reputed to have been an admiring correspondent with the late unlamented Timothy McVeigh. It seemed Dench had gotten out of jail again. Batman drew a batarang from his belt, attached it to a grapple cable, worked out the angle, and whipped the batarang down so it encircled Dench's neck, caught in a loop, and pulled tight. He jerked Dench off his feet, winding the other end of the batarang around an iron ventilation pipe. Dench's fingers tightened on the shotgun, as Batman hoped they would, and the 12-gauge fired. Dench dropped the gun and clawed at the loop around his neck. It wasn't tight enough to choke Dench to death anytime soon, Batman knew, not with Dench's hands free, but he also knew that it would make an interesting sight for the other Brotherhood thugs spilling from the side door at the sound of the gunshot. It was all a decoy, so he could get behind them.
What the hell? Dench! Someone cut Dench down!
Look! Look at that thing on the rope there! It's shaped like a bat! Goddamn bat's here!
Batman was already at the back of the building, crashing through a window into the main room of the building, accompanied by a shower of broken glass as he dropped past an old earth mover to the floor. The first 3 stories of the building were taken up by one big room, storage for outdated construction equipment and old trucks, even a mid-20th century fire truck. In the cleared space on the dusty concrete floor near the front was an open crate, with nothing in it.
So, you thought you decoyed us, you cross-dressing lowlife?
Batman threw himself behind an old backhoe, amazed to see the rounds from the weapon tear the engine cover off the old machine, rip the engine apart, turn it into shrapnel. That was one powerful gun. One of the rounds ricocheted around the room until spent, it rolled to a stop against his boot. The bullet, made of some shiny alloy, was as round as a ball bearing, like a ball from an old muzzleloader, but smaller. Batman clambered quickly to the rear of the backhoe and poised there, crouched, looking down to see White Eyes grinning from the center of the floor. Damn, the SOB was big.
Come on down, Cape Boy! You look like a fairy in that outfit! I got some real manhood for you right here! Come and get it!
The weapon in White Eye's hands had a disc lying flat atop it, a drum that gave off a hum as it spun within itself, the whole thing like a machine gun from World War I in outward appearance. Inwardly, it would be something far more sophisticated.
A centrifugal gun. A dread.
He'd seen prototypes blueprinted in Wayne Industries' intelligence report on new ballistic technologies. The Dread gun was one of them. It fired thousands of small spherical bullets with a rapidity and force delivered by centrifugal energy far in excess of an ordinary machine gun. This was the Brotherhood's homegrown version of a Dread. With weapons like that in the hands of an army of enough racist criminals, the balance of power in the United States could shift.
Fancy moves you got, Bat Thing! Like one of those pretty boy figure skaters. Your costume would look good out on the ice, skating to the blue Danube!
Batman was moving along the top of the backhoe, almost crawling, keeping its bulk between him and White Eyes.
He's up there!
Batman leapt to the right onto the old fire truck. He vaulted over its mildewed canvas hoses and came down onto another Brotherhood sentry on the other side. The guy was out cold before he hit the ground, with Batman landing on his chest. He leapt off, ducked behind a road grader, circled it to try to flank White Eyes. He stepped over the prostrate form of another man, this one in uniform, an unconscious security guard, with an egg-shaped lump on his forehead where someone had cold-cocked him.
Stay down, play dead. I've got it covered.
As he spoke, he threw a batarang over the grater, so that it rebounded from the wall on the other side of the building. White Eyes reacted. Batman had his grapple ready now, stepped out and fired it toward the gun in White Eye's hands. The claws of the grapple caught the gun. He gave the exact twist and tug needed, making the grapple recoil to him, pulling the gun with it.
You sneaky son of a whore!
The gun landed on the floor at Batman's feet.
You afraid to fight me without a gun?
Let's go!
Without your little troop of Neanderthals backing you up?
Batman stepped out into the open.
That's too bad. But I'll get to them later.
His right hand had drawn his cape up in front of him, so that he seemed a dark, indistinct shape with horns and gleaming eyes, till he spread the cape open. His gloved hand spread wide, as if ironically offering an embrace.
Well, let's go, Big White.
Looking at the Bat face to face, wasn't exactly what White Eyes had anticipated. He didn't see the clownish figure he described to Skeeve. He saw a shape carved from the darkest heart of a thundercloud. He saw a figure pulsing with a hunger for vengeance. Like Skeeve had said, a demon. Seeing Batman in that moment, White Eyes had a momentary nightmare premonition. But he suppressed the feeling, angrily deciding that Batman had somehow induced in him the superstitious dread he cultivated on the street.
Stay back, Brotherhood! The Bat Thing is mine!
Batman waited, not even tensing, as the big man charged him, then let the taijutsu move that he'd already selected unfold itself. The way of evasion and redirection, the striking at the enemy's soft places while he rushed past you off balance. At the last possible instant, Batman slipped aside, driving a knee into White Eye's soft parts under his ribcage, feeling it jab past the hard muscles to slam his innards. The Dark Knight drew back, spun to set himself for his adversary's recovery. White Eyes, faster than he looked, had managed not to fall, and was already coming back at him, big hands held like thick swollen talons in front of him, face as rigid and white as the onrushing grill of a semi-truck, and showing glints of pain that let Batman know he'd hurt him. Batman let White Eye's second rush seem to knock him back, but instead he rolled onto his back, took the big man on his boots, and propelled him over and past, so that White Eyes flipped over on his back. Batman jumped to a standing position in a blur, whirling, sweeping his cape out of reach with his right hand. He was aware that his cape was sometimes a liability. It provided extraneous material an enemy could get a grip on and use against him. But it had advantages at other times, involving psychology and camouflage in dark places that made it worth the risk. White Eyes was up almost as fast as Batman, but the breath had been knocked from him by the fall onto his back. Big White's muscles swelled with his fury, veins stood out on his neck, his eyes bugged, his teeth bared, his hands clutched, and Batman knew that if this man got a good hold on him for even half a second, he'd break his spine in two.
Cops outside! We gotta get out of here, Big White!
But White Eyes rushed again. And Batman feinted left, then dodged right when White Eyes went for the feint. He grabbed the big man's left arm and twisted, using momentum against him, throwing him in a classic move. Again, White Eyes was flipped painfully onto his back. In the background, Batman was dimly aware that the security guard, a spindly little man, was up, staggering toward his fallen pistol. Batman set himself to kick White Eyes in the jaw as the big man started to get up. One of his minions kicked the centrifugal gun to him, and he swept it up.
I help, Batman!
The security guard was running between the two men.
No!
Batman dove to put himself between the little man and the big gun, knocking the security guard aside even as White Eyes opened fire. Gotham Police Detective Cormac Sullivan was just stepping into the doorway of the Drago building when he saw Batman leaping to block the gunfire from White Eyes, taking a strafe that otherwise would have cut down the security guard. The little guard had sprawled to one side as Batman was jerked by the impact of the bullets to change his trajectory in midair, like a football player intercepted by a lineman, slammed in a completely different direction to lay limply up against a tall stack of forklift pallets. The stack overturned, collapsing onto Batman, burying him. Cormac had his gun out, was aiming it toward White Eyes.
Drop it, damn you! Drop it!
White Eyes pointed the centrifugal gun at Cormac and squeezed the trigger. Nothing happened. It was out of ammo. But Cormac's shot, fired while White Eyes was bringing his weapon to bear, cut the air by the stump of the big man's missing ear. White Eyes ducked behind the road grader.
This is Sullivan! I need backup right now!
In pursuit, Cormac ran through the empty, dimly lit spaces of the room. Moments later, he found an open door behind the grader. And beyond it, a black SUV without a license plate, roaring away into the darkness. White Eyes was making his escape.
Somebody get after that vehicle now! Black Explorer, no plates, go!
A patrolman ran to his cruiser to take up the chase, but Cormac didn't think it was going to work. The SUV had too much lead, and chances were that White Eyes had his escape route planned out. Probably would be transferring to another vehicle soon. Cormac turned to see the security guard dazedly pulling wooden pallets from Batman's still form.
He saved me! He saved my life! He knew! He took it for me!
Yeah, that's how it looked to me.
They'd gotten the pieces of wood off Batman, and Cormac could see he was breathing anyway, but apparently out cold.
Best move away from him, Detective. He's dangerous.
Cormac looked up to see Sergeant Breen and a jailhouse cop with a name tag that said Van Wyman standing there, guns in hand. The guns were pointed at Batman.
What are you two doing in here? Call an ambulance and get after the men who were in here. The men who assaulted the security guard.
They're long gone. Before we got here, most of them. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. I only saw the one big guy, and he's like gone, dude.
What the hell are you doing here anyway, Van Wyman?
I was passing by with the sergeant here, and we heard a shot and thought we'd lend a hand, like. So that's the bad guy, huh? Look, he's bleeding. Human as you and me, dude. Let's get this mask off.
No. Get away from him.
Cormac stepped closer to Batman. The security guard looked back and forth between them.
I am going to the maintenance office. Call for more help.
He loped off toward the stairs. Van Wyman was staring at the gun in Cormac's hand.
Breen? What the hell's he doing?
Breen holstered his gun to diffuse the tension.
Oh, he's worried, Van. Right, Sullivan? You're afraid, are you now, that we'll hurt the man if we take off his cowl with the wound and all? Why, Detective, he's shot in the head and the chest. He's a dead man anyway. And there's a reward for this man. He's a vigilante is what he is. A criminal. I say we unmask him. And you leave him to us after that. We'll take care of him while you go after the perps in this case. What do you say now?
Cormac glanced down, saw Batman's eyes fluttering. Looked like he was struggling to regain consciousness. Maybe hearing what was going on. Despite wounds in the chest and head, there was a chance that this man would live to fight crime again. Gordon believed in Batman, and Cormac believed in Gordon. More than that, he'd seen Batman make himself a human shield to save the life of someone he probably didn't know, someone a lot of people would have thought as inconsequential beside the big players in town. But Batman didn't think a mere security guard was inconsequential. Batman was willing to die for him. Plus, Batman had done a lot of good in the last year or so. He wouldn't be as effective if people knew who he was. And finally, Cormac didn't like Breen or Van Wyman. He was pretty sure they were dirty cops. He reflected that Van Wyman was the one who'd found Skeeve hanging in his cell, a supposed suicide. No way was Cormac going to let these scumbags take Batman's mask off. Maybe it had to be done. The guy was technically a lawbreaker after all, a vigilante. But Gordon would be here soon. Let him do it if it had to be done.
If Captain Gordon wants to unmask him, he will. I expect the doctors will have to do it at the hospital, but you two? No.
I have to insist, Detective. Best for the community to know.
Breen knelt and reached for the cowl.
I'm warning you, Breen, back off from him.
And I'm telling you, Detective, the mask comes off.
So Cormac drop-kicked Breen in the face. It felt good, too. He'd been frustrated as hell with the Gotham City PD. Every time he tried to get something done, some dirty cop like Breen blocked him. Right now, Breen was sitting on his ass, clutching his bleeding nose.
Why, you nigger shitheel, you! I'll have you up on charges. I'll turn you into internal affairs.
You do what you want, you Mick prick.
Van Wyman was scowling, fingering his gun, and Cormac knew he was seriously thinking about using it. Cormac stepped over and shoved his own pistol in Van Wyman's face.
You'll drop that gun. Toss it away. Now! That goes for you too, Breen, or you'll clean his brains off your uniform.
Oh, you're going down, my friend! Behind you are two patrolmen. They just seen you threatening a brother officer with a gun.
Say, what's going down here? Detective?
Hey, that's the Bat. Let's take off his mask.
No!
Cormac spun to point his gun at the startled uniforms. He was in too far to back off now. It'd all be meaningless otherwise. He could feel his career in Gotham slipping away.
Hey, whoa, Detective, what are you doing? That Bat bastard is wanted for breaking and entering and questioning on all kinds of stuff. Last year, I remember.
What the devil is this all about? Sullivan, lower that weapon.
Yes, sir. Misunderstanding. Heat of the moment.
Bullshit! He kicked me in the face!
Did he? Shame I wasn't here. I mean, to stop him.
Gordon noticed Batman in the debris, stirring slightly. He saw the breaks in Batman's chest armor leaking blood. and blood dripping from under his mask. Then they saw the whirling light of an ambulance pulling up outside.
Good timing. We've got to get this man to the hospital.
Hey, Captain, we could pull the mask off first.
No, that'd be like taking off a motorcycle helmet when a man might have a neck injury. Let the surgeons do it at the ER.
1 minute later, Cormac and Gordon were riding in the back of the ambulance, with Batman lying on a gurney between them, leaving Breen and Van Wyman to glare after the ambulance as it drove away.
Guy over here out cold. Has an Uzi with it.
That's our caller. We'll take care of him. You two go out and secure the street.
Sure thing, Sarge.
When the patrolmen had gone to their cruiser, Breen knelt over the fallen man.
Huh? Get the hell out of here. Use that door to the alley.
Yeah.
Let's get to the hospital. We'll get our chance. We'll make it look like a suicide.
Make what look like a suicide, Breen?
I'll show you.
The ambulance drivers, Ed and Perdue, two brothers from Texas who'd moved to Gotham City together, were passing a small flask bottle back and forth as they raced up the narrow streets. A funny-looking, low-to-the-ground black car was pulling up in front of them, blocking their route, just before the turn onto Courtney, and it was slowing down.
What the hell?
Perdue hit the brakes. The flat black car ignored them. He couldn't see into it. Tinted windows. Then, all of a sudden, moving in a way no car should naturally be able to move, all four wheels turning 180 degrees at once, it whipped sideways to block the road completely. The car made Ed think of the Nautilus, like he'd seen at Disneyland, only this was a car, not a submarine. Ed and Perdue gaped at each other, then back at the car. The wing doors of the strange, low, oddly finned vehicle raised up, like a bird lifting its wings in a mating dance. They could see right into the car. There was no driver.
Ed, looks like there ain't no...
It couldn't be.
I gotta go look inside her.
You can't. We gotta back up, get out of here. We got a patient.
But Perdue was already climbing out, walking over to the vehicle. It was empty, all right. He turned to spread his hands in a theatrical shrug at his brother, then stared past the cab of the ambulance at the two cops carrying the Bat Guy between them. They'd taken him from the back and were now helping him walk past Perdue and to the empty car.
You can't drive, friend.
Won't have to.
Batman climbed painfully into the car and sank into the seat. The wing door shut. The car lit up and then drove itself away. That's how it seemed to Perdue, though he couldn't see into it. It just drove itself away.
Now look here, how am I
Don't
gonna...
worry about it. It was a hoax call.
Gordon counted $80 out of his wallet and tucked it into Perdue's shirt pocket.
What about for my brother?
The dark cop pulled out his wallet. Alfred was waiting anxiously at the entrance ramp in the cave when the Batmobile drove through the hidden doors, into the cave itself, and right up to him. It drove at him, but he didn't flinch, and it stopped on a dime, as he'd known it would, inches from his knees. The wing doors raised up, and Master Bruce tried to climb out. And fell back. Alfred helped him up toward the infirmary.
How bad is it, sir?
I don't know. Till we get this gear off,
Times like this, Master Bruce, I wish we had some help.
Someday.
10 minutes later, Bruce was lying on his back on an examining table as Alfred gingerly peeled off the damaged breastplate. He stared at the wounds on Bruce Wayne's chest. In the lesions were what looked like old-fashioned musket bullets, only shinier, perfectly round. 4 of them embedded in the muscle of his chest, each one sunken in most of the way, but still quite visible. The armor had soaked up most of the impact, but so powerful was the centrifugal gun that its bullets had broken through anyway, when others couldn't. Luckily, the projectiles had spent most of their force by that time, wounding Bruce only superficially. The wound on his head was a minor scalp contusion, requiring half a dozen stitches at the back of the hairline. Alfred, who had acquired almost as much medical training as an ER intern, looked into Bruce's pupils with a small penlight.
I believe you have a mild concussion, sir. On the whole, however, pending the X-ray, you've been quite fortunate. I wonder, Master Bruce, just how long you'll continue to press your luck.
I have to press it till it breaks sometime. Stitch me up.
Morphine, sir?
No. I need a clear head. Just get it done, please.
Very good, sir. But you've lost a good deal of blood. You're going to need some rest.
It was all over for Cormac in a little more than a week. Oh, he could have fought the termination, gotten the inquiry stretched out for months, but he was disgusted that the chief was taking Breen's side over his, refusing to consider the corruption allegations. Then there was the whole issue of what had happened to Batman. He jumped out of the ambulance, jumped into a car on his own, did he? All shot to pieces. Likely story, Sullivan. Cormac had insisted that Gordon be left out of the inquiry. He claimed that Gordon had left the ambulance before Batman had, called off somewhere. Gordon had a job to do. He let Cormac take the fall, because it was a fall he was going to take, no matter what. So Cormac had been fired, which removed his last reason for staying in Gotham City. Gordon was walking Cormac from his apartment building out to the street so he could catch a ride to the airport.
I'm still grateful to you, Cormac. We're both grateful.
I was gonna take a leave of absence anyway, see if I can find my son. So, now it's a permanent absence. So what?
Maybe not so permanent. We'll work together again someday, if you're willing. You'll see.
Gordon had said he'd arranged a ride for him to the Gotham International Airport. He'd expected to see a patrol car, one of the friendlier local cops driving, but there was no one out here.
You did say there was a ride?
Yeah, least I could do. Not one of ours. A limo, more or less.
A limo? Why the hell not? Any luck on that case?
White eyes? No, he's dropped out of sight. Story is he's left town, gone to some secret compound somewhere. I got word that a big gun deal went down in Italian town. There's rumors of a domestic terrorism move coming. Trying to get the Department of Homeland Security on it, but those guys...
I know. Believe me.
What are you gonna do now?
I got some friends looking for my son out in L.A. I'm gonna need money. Sent most of what I had to my ex, alimony settlement. So I got a one-off job in San Francisco. Should be over real quick. Then it's down to L.A. to follow up on Gary.
What type of job?
Skip trace, my old specialty.
Cormac looked at Gordon to see what his attitude would be. Some cops look down on bounty hunters.
Something to be said for bounty hunting. Take a job, get it done, take some time off. Not so much responsibility.
Has its ups and downs. Maybe I should call a cab. I don't see any...
No need. Here comes your ride.
A low Bible black car drove around the corner and pulled up in front of them. The wing door on the passenger side lifted open.
Somebody call for a car to the airport?
I cannot believe I'm doing this.
The Batmobile was taking turns at speeds that would have flipped an ordinary car. Batman, glancing at Cormac, noticed that he was digging his fingers into the meager upholstery. He slowed a tad, though there was really no danger of a crash.
I mean, suppose we get stopped by the highway patrol or something. How do you avoid that anyway when they see this thing? You can't outrun them all when they call for backup.
Batman didn't answer for a moment, trying to decide if he should reveal some of his methods. He owed this man. He could tell him just a little.
First, I have a device that tracks almost every cop in the area. If I can, I drive where they're not.
Well, how do you track them all?
Trade secret.
He wasn't going to tell Cormac about the Wayne Enterprises satellites with more than one function. Their spy functions known only to him and Alfred. Nor would he tell him about the small bat-shaped RPVs, the remote piloted vehicles that sometimes surveilled the city for him. He also didn't want to mention the Batmobile's camouflage, the digitally impregnated skin that could copy its backdrop when activated by an electric current, so that if he pulled over with the digital camouflage on, a cop in pursuit would drive past without seeing him. But the license plate? Why not?
They don't always get interested when they see the car. License plate's digital, doesn't really show any definite set of numbers, changing all the time. Looks like a different plate to everyone who sees it.
Gotta be more to it than that.
Batman nodded, but didn't elaborate. They were pulling into the airport complex. Cormac looked at the dashboard, puzzling over all the indicators and dials. There were small computer monitors, mini television screens, the surveillance screen tracking a detailed topographical image of the city.
What, no iPod hookup?
Batman smiled thinly and shook his head. Cormac looked closer at him. Couldn't see much in the shadowy cockpit of the Batmobile.
How you feeling, Batman? I mean, you were, shot up pretty good.
Wasn't as bad as it looked.
Actually, Batman was still in a lot of pain. The cowl hurt his head. Driving hurt his chest. He was going back to Wayne Manor after this. He needed another few days before he could go on a mission without popping his wounds open.
We're almost there.
They pulled up at the airport passenger drop-off area.
I wanted to tell you personally, Cormac. I owe you. If you need my help, need it badly, call Gordon. Tell him you feel like you're howling at the moon. Give him a phone number. I'll call back. And if I can help, I will.
For a moment, he met Cormac's eyes. Cormac shivered, looking into them.
Your war is my war, Cormac. Remember that.
Cormac stared at him, then nodded. Somehow, Cormac's luggage was waiting behind the car. A fat, red-faced airport cop came jogging up, pointing at the Batmobile as it drove away.
It looked like... when the door was open, was that...
Nah, man, costume party. Wish I could have gone with him, but I gotta make a plane.
Cormac picked up his luggage and walked into the airport. He just wanted to get to California, put this damn spooky town behind him. He just wanted to find his son.
What precisely am I to look for, sir?
I don't want to say exactly. I want you to see it on your own.
They were standing on the natural floor of the Batcave itself. It was mid-evening, after the bats had left for the night. The two men stood on the great stone floor beside a rock wall leading up to the stalactite-fanged ceiling of the main chamber. They both wore helmets with lights on them, and in their beams the wall showed outcroppings of moon milk, clusters of aragonite, dripping stone pendulites glistening with microbial slime, and a thin stream of water that flowed away into a spill sink at their feet.
There.
Batman pointed at the wedding cake-like base of a gigantic column about 25 yards away.
I see only an interesting speleogenic formation, Master Bruce. Fascinating to consider that the column is formed in the macro cavern by the fusing of the stalagmites and stalactites. Over millennia, the dripping carries mineral deposits which, by slow degrees...
Yes, thank you, Alfred, I know. But stop where you are and look over there, beyond the column. There, in the shadows under that farther column, in the calcite flow. See it?
I am sorry to disappoint, sir, but I see only stone, and the shapes are rather suggestive to the imagination.
Yes, it could be that. But if you don't mind, Alfred, we're going to search this cavern.
We've never found the end of it, sir. It would take a team of speleologists weeks, months.
I mean the main chamber, at least. Come on.
You cannot describe what we're looking for?
If I do, you'll imagine you see it. Suggestion works on you, too. But it's more or less shaped like a man.
They searched the main chamber and some of the adjacent passages, but they saw nothing that shouldn't be in the cavern. Yet Bruce felt sure something was there, watching him. He sometimes glimpsed it out of the corners of his eyes, just in the place he'd been looking before. When he looked back, it was gone, but he felt sure, somehow, it was merely hiding. A bat flew over a biker bar. The bat circled, then landed on top of a tin lampshade over the light bulb illuminating the sign at the front door. The bat had metal claws. Between the lamp and the door was a sign, Hog Hell, Bar and Grill. The bat's artificial head swiveled on its simulated fur shoulders and tilted to look down at the front door. The micro cameras in its eyes focused. It opened its mouth, the tiny directional mic coming into play. In the Batcave Command Center, Bruce had removed his costume's gloves so he could use the keyboard and joystick more accurately as he controlled the bat, actually a small remote-piloted vehicle. The bat was made from cutting-edge Wayne Technologies components, the newest combination of hardened plastics, light alloys, compacted batteries, and surveillance gear that the CIA was just now getting around to testing. Bruce had spent hours practicing over the past week, controlling RPVs like this one, and all the training was paying off. Its surveillance gear was working too. He was getting a pretty decent down-angled digital video transmission in the computer monitor. And good quality sound as the bar's door opened and two shaggy bikers came out, wearing only leather pants, boots, and vests in the unseasonably warm weather. He couldn't see their faces very well from this angle, but one of them had a bald spot on the top of his head, and both had Aryan Nation tattoos on their shoulders, probably had done time together. One of Batman's snitches had heard on the street that some of the Brotherhood frequented this bar. The bikers came outside to smoke, and for 2 nights Batman had been listening to their talk as they puffed Camels and passed joints.
It's like a goddamn Indian summer out here.
Yeah, it's that global warming shit. Man, I gotta pee.
Don't piss on the front of the building again. Tinky'll break a pool cue over your head. Weather's supposed to change in a day or two, though. Maybe go for a run first on my bike.
You get them new glass packs in that custom dyno of yours?
Yeah, man. That sucker's loud now.
Yo, you got any tree to put into this cigarette?
No, you want Blunt, talk to Squeaky. Or Rick, unless he's gone to his meeting.
There a meeting tonight?
Well, not the Nations, the Brotherhood. Come to think of it, Rick ought to be here tonight, because his operations meeting's not until tomorrow night.
Tomorrow? Maybe I ought to go. I was thinking of volunteering.
They're having a hard time finding guys for this one. I don't know what the operation is. I guess it's a one-way trip, though. You want to go? They're interviewing guys over at that beat-up old Y on the west side. One of those after midnight things.
Is that Y where we banged that Puerto Rican chick? What a shithole that is. You're not going to the meeting?
I ain't volunteering for that shit. I'm telling you, you ain't coming back from this one, dude.
When they gonna get us those weapons they promised?
Hey, don't even talk about that out loud, man. There was a snag, but we'll get 'em when the major move comes. Brethren all over the country gonna get their orders and tear the Jew boys a new one. Oh, God. I gotta give these things up. Bad for the health, man. Come on. I'm gonna go do me a line and some Jell-O shots.
The 2 men pushed through the door into the bar, and Bruce leaned thoughtfully back in his chair.
Master Bruce?
Yes, Alfred?
Dinner will be ready in 45 minutes, and the lady will probably be here in half an hour.
I'll come up and change.
Bruce had done a fair amount of strolling with pretty girls in the moonlight, as he was doing now on the grounds of Wayne Manor. But with Taya, it felt different.
The skiing accident does seem to have left you moving stiffly, Bruce.
Taya reached up and touched the bandage on his head, with no more pressure than a lighting butterfly.
Does the wound on your head hurt you?
Mostly it itches. It's just a slight wound. I had a concussion, but that's past.
Your chest is bandaged under the shirt?
Yes, I ran into a couple of tree limbs. Shouldn't drink before skiing.
She looked at him sharply, but it wasn't to reproach him for drinking and skiing. He could tell that she simply didn't believe him. She knew he didn't drink much.
Here we are.
They came to the center of the Rose Garden maze and found a linen-covered table decked out with china and silver service.
What? You sneak! You said we were going to look at the grounds before dinner. I thought we were going out.
You prefer to go out? I can call the car. Alfred will drive us anywhere you want to go.
No, this is wonderful. But you know I'm a vegetarian.
I haven't forgotten. Alfred brought in the best vegetarian chef in Gotham for this. I said, a vegetarian pizza from Domino's will do for her, but he insisted.
You liar. This was your idea. It smells wonderful.
She was only joking, calling him a liar, but it hurt anyway, because he was. Being Batman meant that Bruce Wayne had to do a lot of lying. It was all for a good cause, he told himself. He didn't lie to women about his intentions. He didn't lead them on. But he often had to make excuses. Taya was lifting the covers off the serving dishes.
Oh, braised tofu and shiitake! Ginger fried rice! You remembered!
He drew her chair back for her, and she sat with a swish of her white silk dress. He poured sparkling water for her and sat vis-a-vis, smiling.
You look great in the moonlight.
I can't believe the weather is cooperating so much. My pantheist friends in the hills back home would say the sky gods had decided they approve of us.
We also had a very exact weather report.
He served the food up himself, and she gave it her full attention. Not gluttonously, but with conscious appreciation. Afterward, they sat holding hands. It felt natural to just sit there with her small hand in his. He considered as he sipped his mineral water. Maybe he could tell her.
Bruce, is there anything you want to tell me?
He almost choked on the Pellegrino at the synchronicity of her question. Was it just coincidence? Or had she read his mind? Like many people deeply trained in consciousness meditation, she could be spontaneously intuitive. He tried to block off any thought of Batman, just in case.
Anything I want to tell you? What exactly?
Just... You seem to have something you're brooding about. Something... I saw a man in a cape.
What?
In a musical. What was it called? Oh yes, The Phantom of the Opera. Sometimes you seem to brood like he does. Like some part of you is watching from the shadows.
I have been thinking about that visitor.
Have you seen it again?
Yes. Briefly. Yesterday evening. I tried to get Alfred to see it. No go.
That doesn't mean it wasn't there.
The light-hearted young woman had vanished. The sage appeared, speaking with a conviction of understanding. She had studied certain things longer than he had.
You must acknowledge this thing. Meet it to know what it is, Bruce. You will have to give this darkness its proper place within you to subdue it. Perhaps it is another I within you, which you must consume and digest before the ghost can be released.
So you think it's just psychological? Like a shadow self from Carl Jung?
Perhaps it's more than just psychological. What is a poltergeist? Is that only psychological? No. But is it really a living being? Not really that either. The substance of the world's own mind reacts to our minds and will create things, temporary beings made from our obsessions. They may be quite fearful, or they may be just... what do you call it in English? Harbingers? Omens.
Yes, but what do you mean? Consume and digest it. How?
You do that by seeing its part in you. By observation. By being watchful.
If that's what it is it dangerous? I mean, I'm not...
I know you are not a coward, Bruce. I remember when we went to Kathmandu on an errand for the Rinpoche, and we got lost looking for the incense shop, and those men tried to rob us. You knocked 2 of them down like a lightning strike. Crash.
I remember you knocking them down.
That was their friend. Only one. I used the no-shadow kick.
I remember. They never saw it coming.
She put her wrap over the back of a chair, stood, and kicked off her pumps.
Now, I have learned a thing in the Philippines called arnis. I'll show you if you want, and I'll try not to hurt you.
He had to grin. She weighed about 120 pounds, if that, but he knew better than to underestimate her.
What, here next to all this crystal? Come on over here then, away from the table. Alfred would never forgive us if we broke anything.
Now, this particular move is called gunting, the scissors. You know it?
Not really.
He knew of it, but that wasn't mastering it.
Strike at me here.
Bruce struck, careful to pull his punch up short, but using good form, and she ducked the blow and tapped at the inside of his wrist with 2 fingers as it passed.
Ah! Hey, my hand's numb.
Oh, I didn't mean to do it for real. Not quite so much. My poor little Bruce, and you're already injured. I've hurt you.
But what a great move. You struck the nerve cluster, temporarily disabled my hand.
She took his tingling hand in hers. Her touch was so sensitive and so full of life.
I'll massage it. Any sensation returning?
No. No, dead as a doornail.
Really?
She pressed his wrist to her lips.
Anything then?
I think almost.
She turned her face up to his, to be kissed. He complied.
What about now?
Batman was still feeling his wounds, but so far the ligatures were holding. He didn't seem to be bleeding as he climbed up the fire escape and vaulted onto the roof. into the flickering light of a failing street lamp. He imagined what Alfred would say. He often imagined Alfred's voice, chastening him.
Master Bruce, was it necessary to vault onto the roof? You might have climbed the ladder and not risked your injury. It's not long since I pried bullets from your chest.
But being Batman meant moving like Batman. He crossed the rooftop, looked into the alley. The old West Side Y, they'd said. This derelict building on the west side was an old-time YMCA. So far, Batman hadn't seen anyone here. He'd seen and heard nothing. He removed a small spindly metal device from his belt and screwed it into the tar rooftop so that it penetrated a support beam. He activated it with a touch of his glove. The sound in the headset built into his cowl told him it was scanning the building for human voices.
You're really serious.
Am I really serious? I've been chosen for this. How serious is that? The hand of God is on my shoulder. How serious is that? Is that serious enough for you, huh?
Listen, Carino, we gotta be more committed than those raghead terrorists. And they're committed enough to blow their asses off just to get you.
I ain't got no fear of dying. I know they're gonna take me out. And I don't want to die like Tim McVeigh did, strapped to a table. I told him he should never surrender, and he didn't listen. I want to die fighting the Antichrist.
Uh-huh. Dutch, bring that piece over here. You see this, Carino? This is what we call Steel Thunder. Some call it the Dread. It's our own update on the Dread. Carries twice as many rounds. Now you take this in your hands and you kill them all. And you do it on the schedule we give you. Not before, not after. We're taking a leaf out of them towelheads' book. Simultaneous attacks in many places. But since you look like that page, you're gonna do the most spectacular job once they're back in session. We kidnap the page, you take his ID and clothes and pass. Our man in their kitchen's gonna leave the gun where you can find it. It's coming in the supply truck. But you gotta be cool-headed to pull this off.
That's what worries me about this guy, Rick.
This new voice must be Dutch. A lot of guys went by Dutch, but Batman suspected that this could be Dutch Husker, a biker not long out of the pen after doing 6 years for dealing skag, known to have close connections with the Aryan Nation and other white supremacist prison gangs. The biker connection, Batman's source of the rumored meeting, and the racist tie-in, together with the moniker, argued for Husker.
You telling me this guy's gonna be chill before the hit when he's all talking about being God's chosen little angel, Rick? I don't see it.
If I'm chosen, I am chosen. But that don't mean I can't be chill. You want to see me be chill? I can sit here without moving, like a spider waiting in his web, just watching and waiting, and hungry waiting, hungry waiting, hungry waiting.
Jesus, Rick, the guy is...
Yeah, maybe so. We're gonna have to talk it over in the next room here, Carino. Just wait here. And give me that weapon.
Oh no, if I give you this weapon, what are you gonna do if you decide I'm no good for this? I don't know if I should give you this weapon, man. You better stand back, motherfucker.
Uh-oh. Batman checked the listener's directional indicator. It was pointing toward the southeast corner of the building. He retrieved the device and jumped to the low wall along the edge of the building. If he ran across the rooftop, the men below might hear the drumming of his feet. He padded along the rim wall to the southeast corner. A crow flapped angrily out of a nest under the roof's cornice, and he nearly lost his balance. He squared himself again, waved the crow away, and knelt, testing the drain pipe with one hand. Seemed solid enough. Batman quickly lowered himself to the drain pipe, descending hand over hand, braking with his feet. In 3 seconds, coming parallel with the only window showing any light, at a height equivalent to the second floor. He climbed sideways over to the window ledge and hunkered, holding on to the window frame, looking in at the 3 men standing below him at the edge of the cracked tile of the old, dusty, dry swimming pool that was the centerpiece of the 2-story room. It was a grimy, cobwebby room with heaps of empty wine bottles and rotting blankets left by squatters, and only one working light dangling in a farther corner. The 3 men were about 30 feet below him, in the nearer corner, and the short, stocky one in a sleeveless Levi's jacket with an odd haircut, cut into the shape of an iron cross seen from the top, was waving a centrifugal gun at the other 2, keeping them at bay. Batman considered the window. Not an easy one to get through. It would tilt up and partway open, but he'd never fit through the opening, and it was edged in metal that would make it difficult to break through and still control his fall. He removed a small laser cutter from his belt. It stored only enough power for 1 or 2 decent cuts, and burned through the bolts holding the window in place, catching the window section before it fell. He sat it quietly on the ledge, all the time listening to the conversation below him.
You know what I got in this backpack, don't you, Carreno?
The blonde man speaking was heavily tattooed, with a swag belly and a leather jacket with Gotham Goth's colors on it. And over one shoulder, he'd slung a backpack.
Got my hand in the backpack, Carreno. Know what I mean?
Trying to psych me out is all. I can look right into your hearts and see. I can see you're getting taken over by the Antichrist to stop me. Because I'm the one, and you better fight it off because
Batman wondered if Carreno was a tweaker, but he suspected this wasn't a case of drug psychosis. This guy felt like a natural-born paranoid schizophrenic. Cannon fodder for the Brotherhood.
Look at the backpack. We can't risk anybody running loose who's not gonna keep his mouth shut, and you seem incapable of it. If you get caught with that gun, you'll start babbling, and then the whole thing goes down the tubes, so I took an oath.
Batman was now moving along an interior ledge, running under the windows, poising. And that's when Dutch caught the motion, looked up right into Batman's eyes. Batman held his eyes as he leapt, coming down right at them as Rick, the tall, lanky, greasy-haired one, turned.
Oh, shit! The bat!
Batman slammed into Dutch with a boot heel to his face, launching the biker backward into the dry pool. The other boot struck Rick hard on the side of the neck.
Stay away from me! No human being moves like that!
Carreno fumbled with the gun, failing to take the safety off. He had a round head, ears that seemed too low on his skull, a snub nose, a spiderweb crudely tattooed on each of his cheeks. Batman whipped a shuriken at him, followed by a batarang. The shuriken stuck deep in the back of Carreno's gun hand, cutting into tendons, making the hand spasm, loosening his grip. And a split second later, the batarang knocked the weapon away. The gun went spinning, ending up near the edge of the pool. Carreno backed away, drooling in fear, his eyes pinpoints.
Stay away from me!
Dutch was inert in the pool. Rick was getting to his hands and knees, and Batman used his boot to almost casually roll him into the dry pool with Dutch.
No, you're a demon thing, that's what you are! Just like Skeeve was saying!
Skeeve was right.
Batman approached Carreno, cape swept up in one fist, like a bat enfolding itself in its wings.
But you and I already know that. When I visited you in your dreams in another form, we both knew, right, Carreno?
Batman assumed that a sick puppy like Carreno had more than his share of nightmares.
You know my name! You are him! The one from a dream! You're Satan!
What form did I take in your dream, Carreno? Do you remember?
Batman was backing him against the wall, well out of reach of the fallen gun.
This is a test, Carreno. What form did I take?
You were a big black dog! You were that crazy vicious dog, Sam, that talked to the son of Sam, and you were telling me what to do, but I wouldn't listen!
No, you wouldn't listen, would you, Carreno? I couldn't fool you. You knew who I really was, so you know who I am now. You know you can't hide things from me. I know all about what you're going to do. You're going out on one of the Brotherhood's operations, a mission to kill my devils. But I wonder if you have the guts to fight my devils, Carreno. Do you?
I will! I will kill them, and I will kill dozens of them, and the others will strike at the same time! I will kill them! I will destroy your minions, Satan!
You're too confused to do it, Carreno. You don't even know what day the operation is.
Oh, yes, I do! The great day is coming! The great day is January!
Shut up, Carreno!
Dutch was climbing up the ladder onto the edge. Batman turned, saw Dutch with his face splashed with blood, his teeth red with it. He had the backpack in one hand.
I gotta get out of here!
Carreno was running past Batman, going willy-nilly for the edge of the pool. Dutch grabbed Carreno and jerked him over the edge into the empty pool below, where he fell to lie stunned beside Rick. Batman reached for a batarang as Dutch, a look of cold determination coming into his face, put his hand into the backpack. There had to be a bomb in there, and Batman had only one chance to live through the blast. He threw the batarang with all his strength and speed, so it struck Dutch in the forehead, knocking him back into the pool. Batman turned and threw himself flat in the corner. The explosion shook the whole building, brought down a large part of the nearer interior wall of the pool and a section of ceiling, blew out the windows, and filled the air with raining debris. Batman felt the blast's heat and shockwave only glancingly. Most of it had been absorbed by the walls of the dry swimming pool.
Damn it.
He stood up, angry with himself for not separating Dutch from that backpack. Through the billowing dust, he looked over the shattered edge and confirmed it. It had been a big charge, and they were blown to small pieces. No time to sift a mess like that for clues. The cops would be here soon. Even the centrifugal gun was destroyed, a tangle of torn metal, half buried in rubble. This wasn't the outcome he'd hoped for. 3 of the Bavarian Brotherhood had gone down, but they'd taken valuable information with them. He looked up at the window, then noticed an exit door blown open at the back of the room. No reason to go the long way. He circled the crumbling pool and went out the exit, tapped his gauntlet to summon the Batmobile from around the corner, and was away, well before the police arrived. Racing through the countryside, on his way back to the camouflaged cave entrance, Batman assessed the fruits of the evening's mission. He had blown it in a way, but he'd learned some things too. The Brotherhood were now using suicide bombers to keep their secrets. They might continue their imitation of international terrorists and use the same weapons in their assault on the so-called Zionist conspiracy, but their main plan seemed to be to arm domestic extremists with unusually powerful light arms. There was more. They seemed to be planning to copy Al-Qaeda's pattern of multiple simultaneous assaults, and their first big assault would be sometime in January, weeks away. They referred to a page and a group of people coming back in session. That suggested that one target was the U.S. Capitol and the United States Congress. It was time to get the word and the sample auto shotgun to the DHS, the ATF, and the FBI through Captain James Gordon, Gotham City PD. Gordon would be discreet about his source. The feds, after all, weren't used to getting tips from Batman.
Sullivan? Cormac Sullivan? To see the boss? I don't think so. No. I don't think Benny wants to see him. No, not him. No freaking way. Jeez, I thought we were done with him when he took that cop job out east in Gotham. That place eats cops alive.
Old Randy was talking to Mrs. Cortland, the secretary, who was almost as old as he was, and making no effort at all to conceal his disregard for Cormac, who was standing 3 yards away in the waiting area of Kennedy bail bonds. It wasn't a waiting room, because it was all one room, partitioned by a greasy oak rail with lathed posts, a feature that was on purpose like something you'd see in the courtroom. It was supposed to give the bondsman's office an official look, as if it were an extension of the court. Behind the rail were half a dozen putty-colored steel desks, each with a dwarfish computer monitor, an untidy heap of forms, and a much scribbled-on desk calendar. There was a water cooler that had been dry as long as Cormac could remember, and a coffee pot that produced sour coffee no matter how freshly it was made. On the wall were shelves of forms and a cobwebby seascape. 2 closed doors led into the only back offices, Lenny's and the one that had been Lenny's dad's before the old man had died. Lots of bail bonds outfits had gone to a friendlier, less institutional look, investing in warm and fuzzy TV commercials about how they understand and they only want to help. But not Kennedy Bonds.
I thought we ought to ask Lenny anyway if he wants to see the man.
Smiling at Mrs. Cortland, Cormac unconsciously straightened his sports jacket. He hadn't seen Lenny in a long time.
So, Cormac, you're working this side of the street again?
Mrs. Cortland tamped some papers into a pile.
I am, for the time being. I had a job up in San Francisco. Came down here to see my boy. Got a message on my cell there might be some work for me here.
Lenny popped his head out the door of his office. A round, balding head, thick glasses, dimpled cheeks, fixed smile, turned toward Randy.
Randy, can you look and see if that tracer from Louisiana is still... Cormac, you showed up.
What, him? You invited him here?
It's good to be home.
This ain't your home, Bruiser. You weren't off to be a cop in Gotham City. Oh, what happened, Mr. Big Shot Detective? Did you screw that pooch and have to come whining back here?
Why, Randy, LA's my home. And this office is my home away from home.
Hell it is.
Mrs. Cortland went back to her desk, rolling her eyes at Cormac, a bit theatrically. She'd been a minor character actress in the 1950s and 60s. Lenny pushed his glasses back on the bridge of his nose with his index finger.
You back from Gotham City for good, Cormac? Going to be in La La Land a while?
Maybe.
It depended on Gary. Cormac had already gone to his ex-wife's place, found her sleeping on the sofa with the TV on. She'd scowled at him, said she hadn't seen Gary yet, didn't know where he was. Cormac had some guys out looking. When they got a lead, he'd search for his son personally. Lenny was gesturing for Cormac to come back to his office, so Cormac went through the gate in the rail, past old Randy.
Jackass.
Cormac went into Lenny's office. Not much more than a cubicle, papers everywhere, and framed pictures of racehorses. Lenny had made almost as much money as he'd lost breeding racehorses.
Close the door, Sullivan, will you? Thanks. Have a seat. Sorry about Randy.
Lenny squinted at the computer screen.
He still blames me after, what's it been, 8 years?
Just the way it played out. The skip you bring in sues us, the old man dies a week later.
Your dad was a friend of mine. Had a bad heart for 15 years.
Yeah, sure. But you know, old Randy's gotta have some beef to get his own pulse going.
Still, there was something in Lenny's voice. Like he wasn't sure if Cormac wasn't the cause after all. Sent out by Kennedy after a minor drug dealer who'd skipped on his bail, Cormac had body slammed the guy so he fell onto a fire hydrant. Hit him just right, or just wrong, and the guy went paraplegic, crushed spine. Cormac could have shot him since the guy was carrying a gun. He'd body slammed him so he wouldn't have to shoot him. Lawsuit was dropped for that reason. But back at the time, the skip's lawyers were yelling for $10 million settlements.
So, you want to talk about what happened in Gotham? The Cape guy? I'm too curious to mind my own damn business.
Didn't make the paper as far as I know. How'd you hear about it?
We got a guy picks people up for us in Gotham. Said you were hooked up with that vigilante. Where's the Cape?
Not hooked up, just tangled up.
You get tangled in this Cape? Make you trip?
Funny.
I mean, geez, how can you take a guy like that seriously? Wears tights, leaps about on the roofs, wears a mask, thinks he's a phantom or something.
That's what I thought for a while. But when you're around him, you do take him seriously. The guy's larger than life. Maybe he's crazy, I don't know, but he fills that costume. You just take him seriously when he's standing there looking at you. Like if you were looking at a mountain lion up close, you don't say, oh, that's just a kitty cat.
So he's impressive in person. Okay, you tell him to come work for us. We'll pay him same as anyone else, Cape or not.
He works free, Lenny.
He is crazy.
This office is smaller than your dad's. Not my place to say, but wouldn't he have wanted you to, move into his?
Probably. And Daryl wants me to sell the building, refinance, start new with a softer look, and maybe...
Lenny glanced at the door and didn't have to say aloud, retire old Randy.
But I can't bring myself to change it yet. I grew up in this place. I feel like I'd look funny in another place, like... Sometimes I just want to sell the business. You see that lady out there? You know how there's a law against guys who know they got HIV, but they give it to people anyway? She's got HIV, that lady, because hubby gave it to her. Well, guess who she's trying to bail out of jail? And he's in there on a charge of giving it to her.
Christ.
I mean, it's business. We got to do it. But sometimes I just think...
He couldn't finish saying it. Just grimaced and looked at the window.
Sure. I know.
That was the best Cormac could do. He didn't want to act like he was Dr. Phil or something.
So, you got work for me for real, Lenny? Or are you going to serve me a summons?
Oh, I wouldn't do that in person. I do have something. I heard you had some guys looking for your kid. Murchison told me. Well, when this came up, I thought my old man, he liked you. I figured he'd want me to give this to you.
He pushed a folder over, and Cormac scanned its contents. A skip named Gimby, Samuel Gimby, a.k.a. Moth. Possession of amphetamines with intent to sell. Gimby's sister had put up bail, risking her property, and Gimby had jumped. The Santa Monica Detective Agency had word he was somewhere in the vicinity of Santa Monica Pier. No luck actually finding the guy. Santa Monica police claimed not to be able to find him, meaning they hadn't really tried. Names associated with Gimby: a teenage boy known only as Dirk, a teenage girl who called herself Cruella, one Lawrence Murch, one Donkey Dipsy, and a teenage boy thought to be one Gary Sullivan. Cormac froze in his chair. His sight seemed to dim. Then he made himself turn the page and scan for further references to Gary. Nothing more.
You think that's your boy? Wasn't he into that goth stuff? It's the right age. You brought him here one time. He had that streak in his hair, clothes all in black, that stuff.
Could be him.
Possession of amphetamines with intent to sell.
That could be my son.
Almost a bullpup of some kind. But then again, it's not.
Ain't no bullpup.
Grenoble glanced up at Eggerson, whose lined, lean face was tanned from 2 weeks of deep-sea fishing in Hawaii. Bill Grenoble was a black man, dark as an eggplant, in ATF inspection overalls. Though in fact, like Eggerson, he was a special agent, not an inspector.
It was me out there fishing. I'd find me a spot in the shade under a palm tree. Case of beer. Makes me sweat just looking at how you burned up out there. Not that I'd burn, God knows.
I can't drink beer.
Eggerson was leaning over Grenoble's work table, one hand on the back of the big man's steel chair. Except for an outdated rigid tools calendar on the wall, the metal table, with a few small toolboxes on it, was the only feature of the firearms examination room in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Gotham City field office. On the table was a big black automatic shotgun. Grenoble had never seen this model before.
Why can't you drink beer once in a while? For Christ's sakes, you're no alky.
Grenoble adjusted the gooseneck magnifying glass. They were both frowning over the gun as Grenoble used an Allen key from a gun cleaning kit to remove the fixing screws holding the magazine cover.
Well, I can't drink beer because it makes me fat, Bill.
It makes you fat? Bullshit. You were never fat.
Grenoble was 68 pounds overweight. He carried it pretty well, being big-boned and somewhere over 6 feet, but at 56, he was feeling it more every day.
Sure I was fat. I was 17 pounds overweight.
Grenoble looked up from the gun to give Eggerson a look of disgust.
17 pounds. Piss off.
So where'd this come from now?
Grenoble looked at the paperwork.
Let's see. Captain James Gordon, Gotham City Police Department. Says there's rumors of weapons like this and some version of a dread.
Nobody's got a working dread anywhere.
Maybe they do. Says there's rumors they're going to be used by domestic terrorists. Possible Bavarian Brotherhood, possibly in January, possibly against Congress.
Somebody tell the Department of Homeland Security?
Do they listen? They're not interested in militia types. Some of those guys voted for the president.
There you go, bashing the president again. You going to take that gun apart or not, Bill?
Grenoble was already working on it. He made sure the spring motor was unwound, then turned the winding key counterclockwise. He pulled out the center pivot shaft from the magazine and lifted the magazine from the cover assembly. The smell of gun oil was strong in the room.
But that ammo drum almost looks like one of those old machine gun Kelly things, but for shotgun rounds.
Almost like that. That's an automatic, Grenoble. Look at that receiver assembly.
Yeah, that sure as hell is. What, 14 rounds? Shotgun shells? Gone in 3-4 seconds.
They work up a really good belt. They could cut down a tree with that thing. A shotgun machine gun.
Grenoble looked closer at the drum.
Shit, that thing was machined, man.
What do you think?
No, I mean, it was machined, like, expertly.
Hey, double espresso mocha.
Thanks, Downey.
Christ, you can't drink Java, Eggerson?
Oh, man, you gotta drink that in here.
What, you gonna get secondhand caffeine fumes?
I missed that shit. We got a great coffee place next door. Drank coffee all my life. Goddamn doctors.
He held the gun assembly under the gooseneck magnifying glass and peered at the cartridge primer.
Hey, you know what this is? Somewhere I got a manual on something called a street sweeper.
Well, sure, there's a variation on a street sweeper, but the drum is bigger. The whole piece is bigger. More powerful. Better cut on the bore.
Eggerson leaned close to the ammo drum, putting on his glasses.
How many rounds, you say?
I haven't counted the slots yet, but it looked like...
It's not 14 rounds. Look closer, man. It's 21.
21? Jesus. And they could make a few changes so you could switch out a drum pretty quick. 21 12-gauge rounds in 4 or 5 seconds.
You know something? Wrong people making the right weapons? That shit could get ugly.